and welcome back to another episode of 7 Minutes in Heaven, a podcast devotional for educators. I am your host, Pratiá Jordan, blogger-in-chief of Prayer and Pedagogy.com, where our mission is to edify, equip, and encourage educators everywhere. This is episode 15, Keep Your Oil. Today's word comes from Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. And the Good News translation reads, "At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like this. Once there were 10 young women who took their oil lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and the other 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any extra oil with them, while the wise ones took containers full of oil for their lamps. The bridegroom was late in coming, so they began to nod and fall asleep. It was already midnight when the cry rang out, 'Here is the bridegroom, come and meet him.' The 10 young women woke up and trimmed their lamps. Then the foolish ones said to the wise ones, 'Let us have some of your oil, because our lamps are going out.' 'No, indeed,' the wise ones answered, 'there is not enough for you and for us. Go to the store and buy some for yourselves.' So the foolish ones went off to buy some oil, and while they were gone, the bridegroom arrived. The 5 who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was closed. Later, the others arrived. 'Sir, sir, let us in,' they cried out. 'Certainly not. I don't know you,' the bridegroom answered. And Jesus concluded, 'Watch out, then, because you do not know the day or the hour.'" So, this setup here in Matthew 25, Jesus is relaying a parable of what the kingdom of heaven will be like. And he lays out this story about the bridegroom and the women who are waiting to meet with the bridegroom. And I love this story. It has so many different layers to it, but the one that I want to focus on for today is the one that I found so helpful for me, especially as a young, eager, ready to please educator who was used to saying yes to everything, saying yes to every opportunity for responsibility, and saying yes to everything that I was asked to do. And that is the power of keeping your oil. Now, obviously, in the parable that Jesus is relaying here, when he's talking about the women, half of them foolish and half of them wise, it is the wise women who are preserving their oil because they don't know when they're going to need it. They are not for sure what time the bridegroom is going to arrive, and they don't want to be caught lacking or slacking or being without, which is exactly what happens to the 5 foolish women who are waiting. And of course, in this one, Jesus is setting up a spiritual parallel for how we always need to be prepared for the coming of Christ, for the coming of the end of days and things of that nature. And of course, that's very true. Spiritually speaking, we want to make sure that we are prepared to have that face-to-face, spirit to spirit, face-to-face encounter with Christ, because we do not know the day or the hour. But I also picked up on a real world, tangible parallel, and I think that is especially fitting for educators. And so I only have one point for this episode, and it is this: no, keep your oil. That's it. In the latter verses, especially in verse 6 through 9, where we are setting up that the bridegroom is returning and the 10 women are waking up and they are ready. The foolish women who do not have what they're supposed to have, they don't have their resources, they are ill prepared, they're in a state of emergency, they turn to those who are prepared, to those who came ready to wait, those who came ready with everything that they needed, and they say, "Give us some of what you have." And I think a lot of times, especially in education, the system of education, the institution that is education, is created to drain. It is created to pull from, to take from, to ask for almost everything you have. And if you let it, it will take from you as much as you are willing to give it. There will always be an opportunity. There will always be a need. There will always be an emergency of some kind. And I think especially as Christian educators, regardless of whether you work in a Christian institution or a secular institution, the institution of education will take and take and take if you allow it to. And as Christian educators, we can often feel a certain amount of pressure to give and give and give because we see Christ giving, because we get stories and examples of believers in the Bible sacrificing and giving their last and giving their all. And there's certainly a time and a place for that. So it's important that we have an in-tune relationship with the Holy Spirit to know when we are being called to sacrifice. But it is as equally important that we are in tune with the Holy Spirit so that we know when it is wisdom to say, no, I'm going to keep my oil. Here in verse 9, we see the wise ones respond to the foolishness and say, no, indeed, there is not enough for you and for us. And it's okay to say no. It is wise to say no. It is perfectly fine to keep your oil. And I think that especially as a young educator who's very eager to please, very eager to give, I love my craft, right? Teaching is a spiritual gift and a physical gift for me. And so I wanted to give and give and give. And I had to come to a point where I realized the wisdom in keeping my oil, because I would give and sacrifice to the extent that I had nothing left. And especially over the last few years, as I became a wife and I became a mother, I really had to hold on to the fact that I needed to keep my oil for me, that I needed to keep my oil for my bridegroom, that I needed to keep my oil for my husband, for my family, for my ministry outside of education, outside of the school that I work in, outside of the district that I work in, that I needed to keep some of my oil for me because there was not going to be enough for me and for them. And I just want to share this message of encouragement for any educator, whether you're an administrator, a classroom teacher, a para, a nurse, a librarian, or whatever your position is in education. Know that it is okay to keep your oil. Know that there is wisdom in keeping your oil, that it is perfectly fine to say no, and no can be a complete sentence by itself. And if you need some reassurance, some encouragement, some support in knowing that it is Christ-like to say no, that it is Christian-like to say no, that there is wisdom in keeping your oil and not allowing the foolishness and the emergencies and the taking of everybody around you to pull from you to where you do not have enough for you and for them, then I encourage you to come to this verse in this chapter and meditate on it, pray over it, and be confident and secure in knowing that you can say no and that you can keep your oil. So here is your hashtag 7-minute challenge for the week. Remind yourself that no is a complete sentence, and practice saying no and being ready to use it when necessary. One thing that I did was I drafted a couple of different phrases of ways that I like to say no, where I say no confidently and securely, but I'm also polite. So, thank you so much for thinking of me in this opportunity. Unfortunately, I'm not able to add anything to my plate at this time. Different things of that nature. For yourself, go ahead and write out a couple of ways that you can say no and keep them in your back pocket so that you are ready and prepared to say no. I'm keeping my oil when it's time. This has been episode 15, Keep Your Oil. Thank you for joining me at the intersection of prayer and pedagogy. See you next time.